Hey everybody, welcome into Folklore and Flourish. You're here today with Jane on August 10th. We are in week 2 of our Fire and Sun month with the Flame Bearer, and we are in the week of the Sun in Full. So we are with the Sun in Full today with week 2, and our topic for today is the courage with the theme of bravery. So the courage and bravery. Today's lesson is that fire belongs to the bold. So we are really embracing our confidence. We're embracing our courage. We're going to see it's a tale as old as time today. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It is going forward anyways, taking that step towards what scares us and being brave. And we are going to see that in 4 different ways today. It isn't always the biggest fighter, the strongest soldier that is brave. Sometimes it's just that ability to keep showing up, that consistency that is brave. We're going to see that today through Roman, Irish, Japanese, and Mesa folklore today. So it's very exciting. We go from Italy to Ireland to Japan to Kenya. In the Kenyan story, it is told in a couple other regions in Africa, but we're focusing on the Kenyan one today. The question with today is, where must I act bravely? So what in my life is asking me to step up and to face what I'm afraid of? And where can I show my bravery to myself or even to others? And we are going to, for our activity today, we're going to stand tall for a full minute. Stand tall for a full minute, grounding our feet and lifting our chest as an act of embodied resolve. So we're going to act in our own strength and our own resolve today. So for our activity today, we're going to stand tall for a full minute. We're going to ground our feet and raise our chests up high. We are going to fully embrace the sun while also embodying that boldness, that resolve within ourselves. And then my final thought for you guys today is to choose one situation today where you will not shrink or retreat. And I hope you have a great rest of your day. Enjoy the sunshine, stand tall, ground your feet, and remember that fire is for the bold. And I'll see you guys tomorrow. Before we begin, I want to take a moment to honor the cultures behind the stories we are about to explore. The tales shared here come from many peoples, lands, and traditions. I do not change these stories to fit modern expectations or to align with today's social standards. Instead, I present them as they were told, sometimes beautiful, sometimes harsh, sometimes challenging. We are not here to judge the past, but to understand it, to listen, to learn, and to honor the ancestors who carried these stories forward. We also share stories from various religious traditions. These are presented in their historical and spiritual context, with respect for their beliefs that they represent. Every culture deserves respect, context, and acknowledgement, and this space is dedicated to doing exactly that. August 10th, The Courage. Story 1. The Vestal Virgins and the Fire That Cannot Die. At the heart of ancient Rome burned a flame that was never supposed to go out. It belonged to Vesta, goddess of the hearth, and within her circular temple in the Roman Forum, the sacred fire represented something far larger than a single household flame. As long as it burned, Rome itself remained symbolically alive, entrusted with guarding it with 6 priestesses known as the Vestal Virgins, or Vestales, women whose religious authority gave them an extraordinary place within Roman society. They were selected as children and traditionally committed to 30 years of service, years of learning, years of performing sacred duties, and eventually years of teaching those who came after them. Their lives unfolded under expectations unlike those placed upon most Roman women. Vestals could own property, make wills, and move through public life with unusual privileges. But those freedoms came attached to immense responsibility. Among their most famous duties was tending Vesta's sacred flame. Allowing it to die was considered a terrifying omen, a sign that the protective order surrounding Rome had somehow been disturbed. The flame therefore demanded vigilance. Wood had to be supplied. Rituals had to be maintained. Someone had to remain responsible when celebrations ended, crowds disappeared, and darkness settled over the forum. There was little glory in the ordinary repetition of keeping a fire alive, yet that repetition was precisely what made the duty sacred. Courage here looked different from the battlefield heroism celebrated elsewhere in Roman culture. Vestal did not prove herself by charging an enemy with a sword. Her bravery existed in staying faithful to something that could not simply be abandoned when it became inconvenient. And Roman history preserves moments when that responsibility became startlingly literal. When the Gauls attacked Rome in the early 4th century BCE, ancient authors later told how the Vestals fled the endangered city, carrying sacred objects connected with Rome's religious life, rather than simply abandoning their duties to save themselves. Whether every detail of those later accounts occurred exactly as written is impossible to establish, but Romans preserved the story because it expressed what they believed the Vestals represented: guardianship greater than fear. Their courage was not the absence of danger. It is the refusal to forget what had been entrusted to them while danger was present. That makes the Vestals a powerful beginning for today's exploration of bravery. We often imagine courage as a single spectacular moment, but some fires survive because someone chooses them again and again. A promise, a family, a calling, a truth, a piece of ourselves we refuse to surrender simply because protecting it has become difficult. Not every flame deserves endless tending, of course. Wisdom also means knowing when something has truly ended, but when we know a fire matters, courage may look remarkably ordinary. Return to it, feed it, guard it, and refuse to let fear decide when it dies. Rome surrounded its soldiers with monuments, victories, and legends. Yet at the center of the city stood another kind of bravery. 6 women beside a hearth, keeping watch over a small flame upon which an empire symbolically depended. Story 2, Lugh and the Battle for the Harvest. Long before Ireland's fields turned gold beneath the late summer sun, the old Irish stories told of a warrior whose greatest strength was not one extraordinary gift, but the courage to use everything he possessed when his people needed him. His name was Lugh, one of the great figures of Irish mythology and a member of the Tuatha De Danann, the supernatural people of ancient Irish tradition. Lugh was renowned as Savile da Knock, skilled in many arts. But before he could stand among the great leaders of his people, he first had to convince them that his abilities mattered. According to the medieval Irish tale, the Second Battle of Mag Tuired, Lugh arrived at the royal stronghold of Tara and asked to enter. The gatekeeper demanded to know what skills he possessed. Carpenter? They already had one. Smith? They had one. Warrior, harper, poet, sorcerer, physician, craftsman. Each time Lugh named an ability, the answer remained the same. Someone inside could already perform it. Finally, Lugh asked whether Tara possessed one person who could perform them all. It did not. The gates opened. Yet Lugh's talents would soon matter far beyond gaining entrance to a royal hall. The Tuatha De Danann faced the oppressive Fomorians, whose power hung over Ireland, and among their most terrifying champions was Balor, Lugh's own maternal grandfather. Balor possessed a deadly eye whose gaze could devastate those before him. Prophecy had foretold that Balor would someday be killed by his grandson, and despite attempts to prevent that fate, Lugh had survived. When the opposing forces finally met at Moy Tura, Lugh did not remain safely beyond the warriors simply because he possessed knowledge they valued. He entered the struggle. As Balor's terrible eyelid was raised so that his destructive gaze could fall upon the Tuatha De Danann, Lugh acted. In the famous account, he hurled a sling stone with such force that it drove Balor's eye backward through his head, turning its deadly power upon the Fomorian army behind him. The battle shifted. Oppression was broken, and Lugh's place among the great figures of Ireland was secure. But his story offers something richer than the familiar image of the fearless warrior. Lugh's courage begins before the battle. It begins at the gate, when he refuses to believe that because someone else can already sing, build, heal, fight, create, or lead. His own abilities are unnecessary. That is a surprisingly modern fear wrapped inside an ancient story. How often do we stand outside our own metaphorical Tara thinking? Someone else already does this. Someone else has more experience. Someone else belongs here more than I do. Lugh's answer is not that he must be better than everyone inside. His power comes from the particular combination of gifts that only he carries. When the moment finally demands action, those gifts become responsibility. Courage is not merely discovering what burns inside us, it is stepping forward when that fire finally has somewhere meaningful to go. Story 3. Nachi no Oji Matsuri. Carrying fire before the sacred falls. In the mountains of Japan's Kii Peninsula, where ancient pilgrimage paths wind through forests toward one of the country's most sacred landscapes, 12 enormous torches are carried before the thundering waters of Nachi Falls. The festival known today as Nachi no Oji Matsuri, the Nachi Fan Festival, though it was long popularly called the Nachi Fire Festival. Here, fire is not treated casually. The torches are massive, each weighing roughly 50 kilograms, and the men who carry them must maneuver their burning weight along the stone approach to the shrine while sparks scatter, smoke rises, and crowds watch from nearby. But the flames are not a spectacle created merely to prove who is fearless enough to approach them. They have a sacred purpose. The festival belongs to Kumanu Nachi Taisha, one of the 3 great Kumanu shrines and part of a sacred landscape where mountains, forests, waterfalls, and pilgrimage have been intertwined for centuries. At the center of the celebration are 12 tall ceremonial structures called Oji Mikaushi, beautifully decorated objects representing the 12 deities enshrined at Kumanu Nachi Taisha. During the festival, these sacred structures are carried from the shrine toward Hiro Shrine, located near the base of Nachi Falls. Then come the flames. 12 enormous pine torches blaze along the path, their fire traditionally understood as purifying the root and the sacred objects associated with the procession. The carriers grip the torches while flames leap above them, moving deliberately beneath the shower of sparks. Their task requires strength, coordination, concentration, and trust. One careless movement with such a torch could transform sacred fire into dangerous fire, and that distinction gives today's story its power. Courage is often imagined as rushing toward danger without hesitation, but the Nachi festival reveals another kind, the courage to move carefully while carrying something powerful. Boldness without control is not bravery, it is recklessness. The torchbearer cannot conquer the flame, he must respect it enough to carry it correctly. And then, towering beyond the smoke, there is water. Nachi Falls, one of Japan's tallest single-drop waterfalls, plunges down the mountainside behind the ceremony. Fire and water appear together, flame moving upward, water falling downward. Human hands carrying one sacred force before another force no human could ever carry. The image feels almost paradoxical, yet the tension belongs naturally within the spiritual landscape of Kumano, where purification, pilgrimage, death, renewal, and the powers of nature have long converged. For us, the lesson is wonderfully simple. There are moments when bravery means charging forward, but there are others when courage means accepting the weight of something we cannot afford to mishandle. A difficult conversation, a responsibility, a truth, a calling. We may feel its heat immediately. The question is not whether we can make ourselves fearless enough to hold it. The question is whether we can remain steady while we do. The torchbearer does not wait until fire stops being dangerous. He steps forward knowing that it is, places his hands around the weight, and carries the flame where it needs to go. Story 4. The Maasai Morans and the Courage to Protect. Across the grasslands of East Africa, courage was never meant to belong only to the individual. Among the Maasai, generations of young men entered a stage of life associated with warriorhood, becoming Ilmuran, often rendered in English as the Morans, or warriors. Their world demanded resilience. Cattle, central to traditional Maasai life, had to be guarded across enormous landscapes where drought, conflict, and predators could turn an ordinary day into a test of judgment. But becoming a warrior was about more than learning to withstand danger. It meant accepting that one's strength now carried obligations to other people. Historically, young men moved through an age-set system in which initiation marked the transition toward new responsibilities. During the warrior stage, Fomorians became associated with protecting cattle in communities, developing endurance, discipline, cooperation, and the ability to remain composed when confronted by danger. Fire naturally belonged within its world, though not in the simplistic form of a legendary class of fire warriors. Across pastoral life provided warmth, light, cooking, and protection around settlements and camps. At night, when the open grasslands disappeared beyond the glow, the fire created a small circle of visibility within an enormous darkness. Beyond it might be predators. Within it were people, cattle, stories, and responsibilities worth protecting. That image offers a different understanding of today's lesson. Fire belongs to the bold. The courageous person is not necessarily the one who runs furthest into danger. Sometimes courage is the person who stands at the boundary between danger and those depending upon them. For generations, the Maasai warrior's identity was also famously associated with encounters with lions. Lions could threaten livestock, and historic lion hunting became connected in certain contexts with warrior courage and prestige. Yet this relationship has been changing. In parts of East Africa today, Maasai warriors have become important participants in lion conservation, using knowledge of tracks, livestock, landscape, and animal behavior to reduce conflict between predators and herding communities. In some programs, the very qualities once demonstrated through killing a lion can instead be demonstrated through protecting one. The transformation matters because courage must be capable of growing alongside the world around it. Tradition does not become meaningless simply because its expression changes. The deeper value can survive. A warrior still needs awareness. He still needs discipline. He may still have to move towards something frightening, while others move away. But bravery can become preservation rather than conquest. And perhaps that is the final lesson today's 4 stories have been carrying toward us. The Vestals guarded a flame entrusted to them. Lugh stepped through the gate and eventually used his gifts when his people needed them. At Nachi, torchbearers carried tremendous fire with discipline rather than recklessness. The Maasai warrior reminds us that courage reaches its fullest expression when strength discovers something worth protecting. We do not become brave merely so that we can say we survived the fire. We become brave so that when something precious stands behind us, we are capable of standing our ground. Daily Thread for August 10th. Where must I act bravely? Courage is easy to admire from a distance. It becomes something entirely different when the moment arrives and asks something of us. Today's stories remind us that bravery does not have one face. Sometimes it is fierce and immediate. Sometimes it is patient, disciplined, and almost invisible. The Vestal Virgins guarded Rome's sacred flame, showing that courage can mean returning faithfully to a responsibility day after day, even when no one is watching. Lugh approached the gates of Tara carrying many gifts and refused to believe that his abilities were unnecessary, simply because talented people were already inside. His courage began before the battlefield. In a moment, he was willing to step forward and declare what he could offer. At Nachi, enormous burning torches are carried before sacred waters, reminding us that boldness is not recklessness. The bravest person is sometimes the one who understands exactly how powerful the fire is and still possesses the steadiness to carry it. And among the Maasai, traditions of warriorhood reveal courage as responsibility, strength developed not simply for personal glory, but because families, cattle, communities, and today, even wildlife may depend upon people willing to protect them. Together, these stories dismantle one of our favorite illusions about bravery, that courageous people are somehow less afraid. Courage has never required the absence of fear. It requires deciding that something else matters more. There will always be gates we hesitate to approach because we wonder whether we belong beyond them. There will always be responsibilities heavy enough to make us question whether we can carry them. There will always be moments when retreat feels safer than speaking, acting, creating, defending, or becoming. Yet if we wait until fear disappears completely, we may spend our lives standing beside doors we were capable of opening. Fire offers another way. A flame trembles constantly, yet it continues to burn. Perhaps courage can look like that too. We can shake and still move. We can question ourselves and still speak. We can feel uncertain and still take the next step. And importantly, bravery does not mean remaining in every fire, simply to prove that we can withstand it. Sometimes courage means leaving. Sometimes it means setting the boundary, admitting we were wrong, asking for help, changing direction, or protecting ourselves when others expected us to endure. The question is not, what would make me look fearless? The question is, what action would honor what I know matters? Today, we choose one place where fear has been making decisions on your behalf. You do not need to conquer your entire life before sunset. Choose one conversation, one boundary, one application, one beginning, one truth, one step toward the gate. Courage grows through use, and sometimes the smallest brave decision becomes a spark that changes everything that follows. Courage is not waiting until you stop being afraid. It is deciding what matters more than the fear and taking one step toward it anyways.